No, I got a bottle right here. Thank you. Yeah. You're rolling away. What? Where's Brian?
He's right there. I see him.
Hey, Brian.
Right. He's shooting.
Okay, he's rolling. Oh, that's great. Far away from my...
Yep.
He's going to drive right to this gravel and get out. That's what I think. He's going to walk on this path.
Hold up the school.
That's what I'm thinking. So just keep rolling on. We got to take that. It could be wrong. That's great. They're not going to go where they said. All right. We can kill it. You can tell me when. wait for something in particular because you just get watching. It's serious.
You come this way. You go in.
What about the microphone?
You go in. See mine.
Can't go any further. What?
Microphone?
I mean the one they're feeding us with.
It is there, don't use it. Near the minister. Now, where are the tips?
I'm getting them.
Tole siba bwana. Siba nkanyeri.
No, no. Back.
our distinguished guest, President Bill Clinton, and the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, Your Excellency President Museveni, and the First Lady, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Education and on behalf of Kisowera Primary School, you are welcome to this school. Your Excellency, you should not worry about the state of this school and its ability to deliver. I would like to assure you, Your Excellency, that there are many dignitaries here today, and there are many Ugandans with PhDs from Makerere University, Yale, Harvard, Oxford, Dar es Salaam, and the rest, who went to primary schools less endowed than this one. Nevertheless, we have the vision, the zeal, and the collective determination to give this school and many others better infrastructure and atmosphere to deliver education. With this determination and support of friends like Your Excellencies, we shall succeed. Mr. President Clinton, Africa in general, and Uganda in particular, have embarked on the road of democratization and economic development. We in education believe that these two cannot flourish in a population that is largely illiterate. It is like the seed which fell among the thistles. It will have a stunted growth. That is why we are busy implementing the program of universal primary education to create a generation that will be free of illiterates. This will in turn create a stable foundation on which democratic values and sustainable growth will develop and flourish. President Clinton, allow me to take this opportunity to thank Your Excellency and your government and the American people for the support you are giving to our primary education program. For you, Mrs. Clinton, let me pay special tribute. Last time you were here, you visited Segugu Primary School, and the children have insisted on coming to entertain you here as well. You announced that your husband, who is the President of the United States, will visit Africa. We are glad that he's here with you. And would like to thank you for the good job and public relations you have been doing for Africa in general and Uganda in particular. May I now invite Mrs. Museveni to make her remarks, who should in turn introduce Hillary Clinton to make her remarks. I thank you, Excellencies.
Our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by thanking God in a very special way for what is happening in Uganda these days and this day in particular. Our guests may not understand what we celebrate when we talk about Uganda today, but you have to know where we have been to appreciate where we are. While Uganda has been identified with Idi Amin and with AIDS pandemic for a long time, nobody can now ignore the fact that it is changing, and it is changing for the best. And we must acknowledge this positive change. Today, I am honored myself for the opportunity to welcome President and Mrs. Clinton on behalf of all of you Ugandans. I want to congratulate you both on your foresight, which has led you to allow God to use you in a special way, and on your succeeding to see the world through the eyes of God. As a one world, a fact which has been denied by so many players on the world scene, you have chosen to see the world as all different pieces of the same world, whereas others before you chose to isolate and disregard Africa, and thus deprived the rest of the world of what Africa could offer. I thank you, Mr. President, and Mrs. Clinton, for making it your duty to highlight what the world would rather ignore or forget. And now it is my honor and pleasure to thank in particular Mrs. Clinton, who, as the minister said, came here and became a true friend for Uganda. She went out and talked about the problems of Uganda and communicated them in many places. And we must now thank her again in a special way for coming back holding the hand of her husband, the man who the Americans chose to speak for America. Therefore, we are honored to identify with the Clintons. And now I would like you to join me in welcoming Mrs. Clinton in a special way again before President Clinton comes to speak. Mrs. Hillary Clinton, you're welcome here to say hello to these people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my husband and I are very honored to be here. And we want to thank the President and Mrs. Museveni for giving us such a warm, warm welcome. I have enjoyed knowing the President and Janet for several years now, ever since we first met in Washington, D.C. And I am so pleased that I had the opportunity to come with our daughter last year to Uganda to see for myself the progress and commitment that your leadership and your people are making to building a new Uganda. And there is nothing more important in your efforts than what you are doing with education. Your commitment to universal primary education is one that I admire very greatly. I have visited now 2 schools, and I have seen for myself the numbers of young and eager boys and girls who fill the classrooms. And I do mean fill the classrooms. I told the President that Uganda now has a good problem. How do you find the teachers and the material and equipment to educate all the boys and all the girls who are coming to your schools? That is the kind of problem that Uganda should want to have after all your years of facing the challenges and difficulties of the past. And the United States is proud to stand with you as a partner and friend in your efforts to educate your children, to provide health care to your people, to build your economy, to help you with all of the challenges you now face as you move toward the future. And I especially want to thank the boys and girls and young men and women who performed for us today. I thought they did an excellent job, and I want to congratulate you. Last year, when I was in Uganda, I announced that my husband wanted to come to Africa. He very much did, but of course there was no way we could plan specifically as to when he could come. But I am so pleased that a year later, he can see what I was able to see. He can experience what I experienced. He can meet the people who are building a new Uganda and a new Africa. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to invite President Yoweri Museveni to make his remarks and in turn introduce President Clinton to the public who will make his speech. Thank you very much.
Abe Mukono musibe mutyanu. Mujabale emirimu. Kati tubaleetera abagenyi bakulu. Naye tugenda kwogera mu Luzungu kubanga ndowooza abe Mukono bonna bategeera Oluzungu abali wano. Munange UPE yakajja abatayingira mu UPE mugenda kufuna omukisa kati. Tewaba wasigala. Your Excellency, President Clinton, President of the United States of America, the First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Clinton, and your distinguished delegation, government and movement leaders of Uganda, their highnesses, the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, and all of you, abe Mukono abaze wano olwaleero. Mr. President, on behalf of the multitude here, and on behalf of all other Ugandans who are not here today, I welcome you to Uganda. You are most welcome. Having the President of the United States visiting us is a momentous event. This is because he represents a powerful middle-class society that originally migrated from feudal and intolerant Europe several centuries ago and built one of the most powerful and prosperous countries in the long history of humanity. It would serve Africa well if we learned from the many positive principles that guided the Americans in building such a powerful state. In this century, the Americans have made breathtaking, pioneering achievements. In 1969, they landed a human being on the moon, to take one example. Only recently, they landed a robot on Mars. We salute the achievements of the Americans, and we are pleased to be associated with the American people through their president, who is here today. But I would also like to salute the far-sightedness of President Clinton to be the first American president to comprehensively visit Africa. There was one other visit, I'm told, some 20 years ago, but it was not as comprehensive as this one. And then there was another refueling stop by one of the American presidents during the Second World War. The refueling stop is not good enough for these multitudes. I salute, Mr. President, your far-sightedness because of recognizing Africa's tremendous potential, which others do not seem to realize. Africa is 30 million square kilometers in area size, which is 1.5 times the combined area of United States of America and Canada. If you put them together, they will fit into Africa 1.5 times. You find the longest river in the world starting in Uganda. Even out of curiosity or out of tourism, people ought to come to see where the longest river starts in the world. The second largest freshwater lake in the whole world, known as Narubale in our language, which means the abode of gods, is found in Uganda here, in East Africa. The more internationally known name for this lake is Victoria. But we have got our own name, Narubale, meaning where the gods stay. We have no intention of quarreling with the British over this name. At least not yet. Umunyankora agira ati nkuko gashonda kera kumira. The continent has got tremendous mineral resources. Here in Uganda, we have got phosphates, iron ore, copper, and traces of hydrocarbons. This is not to forget the hydropower potential, or the fact that without irrigation, we can produce 2 crops in a year. Besides all those natural advantages, one should not forget the 750 million people who live in Africa today. The population of Africa is estimated to be 1.4 billion by the year 2025. I am surprised, therefore, that some quarters have been talking of Africa being marginalized. Some people have been saying that Africa can be marginalized. This is not possible. Africa cannot be marginalized by the world. It is only the African leaders that can marginalize Africa through their wrong actions. There is nobody who can keep Africa backwards. It is only the African leaders that can do it, as they have done it in the past. Such wrong actions in the past have taken the form of stifling the private sector, have taken the form of brutalizing the African people and stopping them from producing wealth, have taken the form of denying them their political rights, and have taken the form of holding them in ignorance by denying them education. Once the question of leadership is resolved, Africa is unstoppable. There's nobody who can stop Africa once we resolve the question of leadership. It is for this reason that I salute Your Excellency for seeing the potential of Africa the way we see it in the national resistance movement, in our political movement. But then, somebody may say, somebody may say, but if Africa is unstoppable, then why has it lagged behind all this time? And indeed, many people are asking that question, although sometimes they don't ask it out of politeness. They say, but Africa, Asia has developed. Why has Africa not developed? There's some implied idea that possibly there's something wrong with the Africans. The reason for this apparent lagging behind of Africa was initially geographical, and later on it became historical. The geographical constraint meant that in spite of the fact that Africa was the cradle of humanity some 5 million years ago, and in spite of the fact that human beings did not exist anywhere else on the globe except in Africa until about 100,000 years ago, the population of Africa was only about 47 million by 1500 AD. While the population of those who had migrated out of Africa, all these Europeans you see, the Asians, the Chinese, these are all Africans who have lost their pigmentation. Now, when these people left Africa 100,000 years ago, they were a small number. But what is interesting is that by 1500, the Africans who remained in Africa were only 47 million. The Africans who had migrated out of Africa were 300 million. This slow growth in population was due to the problems of the tropics, was due to sicknesses caused by many tropical vectors, e.g. mosquitoes, tsetse flies, etc. A slowly growing population meant also slow growth in political evolution, especially slow growth in political centralization. Lack or low level of political centralization meant small clan-based political units scattered all over this vast continent. In spite of speaking similar dialects or languages, they would not be governed together. This did not mean that there were no attempts at centralization. They were there, but many of them were not sustained over the millennia. Over time, the overlingering of small political units, the overlingering of the small clan-based or tribe-based political units opened the door for another distortion. And this was the conquest of Africa, the colonization of Africa, the plunder of Africa by the outsiders who took advantage of the lack of sufficient centralization in Africa to conquer it. Some people say that Africa was conquered because of technology. This is not true. That the Europeans had superior technology, that's why they were conquered. This is not true. I have told you in the past that Japan and China were inferior in technology when they came in contact with the West. The West tried to conquer China. The West tried to conquer Japan, but they did not succeed. Even here in Africa, the West tried to conquer. Here I am referring to the colonization and the attendant evils of slave trade, as well as general looting. Therefore, what was originally a geographical problem opened the door for a historical one. This in turn led to the stunting of social metamorphosis, which prevented the emergence of a middle class with the attendant problems of lack of cosmopolitan outlook by the influential sectors among the political elite, and also low level of entrepreneurship. Thus, a problem originally of geography created a problem of historical distortions, which in turn created a problem of social and economic stunting. However, within the womb of these cascading historical, geographical, and social problems, seeds of the solution to our problems were already being planted. Interaction with other parts of the world, although they were largely parasitic, our interaction with the rest of the world was largely parasitic. But within this parasitic arrangement, there were also elements that would help us to resolve our age-old problems of Africa by introducing modern medicine that has now controlled the mass killers that used to keep the population of Africa low. We have now been able to control smallpox. We have been able to control sleeping sickness. We are controlling off and on malaria and many other mass killers. This is how the population of Africa has now jumped from 133 million in 1900 to 750 million now. The population of Africa, as you can notice, is still much smaller than the population of India, in spite of the fact that India is 10 times smaller than Africa in land area. The population of Africa is also smaller than the population of China, in spite of the fact that China is 3 times smaller than Africa in land area. The population of Uganda is only 20 million today, yet the optimal population size for Uganda should be about 65 million people. In fact, the population of Uganda in 1956, when I was a young boy, was only 4 million people. The land was almost empty. Although I pointed out above that Africa is lagging behind other continents, it is only in the areas of industrialization, commerce, modernizing agriculture, and social services that this is so. However, in areas of language, of social relations, and of some elements of non-commercialized technology, Africa is far ahead of other continents. Take language, for instance. In the English language, you may only be able to use descriptions to explain, for instance, food. Let's take food, one area. You will hear the English people saying, mashed bananas. Or you hear them saying, a morsel of food. You hear them saying, a mouthful of bananas. You hear them saying, a slice of bread, etc. As you may notice, Your Excellency, all these are descriptive phrases. They are not technical terms of different forms of food. When it comes to my dialect, for instance, my own language, for example, I'll be able to use a single word, which is a technical term for most of these different forms of food. If, for instance, I say ekitonje, I mean a mouthful of solid food. On the other hand, if I'm referring to a mouthful of liquid food, I will not say ekitonje, I will say entama. And when I say enogo, it means a morsel of food before you put it in the mouth, but after you have shaped it in order to draw sauce from the bowl. If I say ekshate describes a banana, a cassava, or a potato, if they are split longitudinally. On the other hand, if you split them transversally, then you use another word, which is called enkobwa. So you can see, Your Excellency, how rich this language is. It is a pity that people in other continents do not have access to this rich vocabulary. The richness of our social relations has enabled us to ride out many catastrophes in the history of Africa. We have been able to overcome rinderpest, to overcome smallpox, to overcome slave trade, to overcome colonial wars, and recently to overcome the problem of the epidemic of AIDS. Even when I say lagging behind in technology by Africa, it is only in recent, and it will be short-lived. By 1400 AD, the Africans had autonomously taken part in all the major human revolutions up to then. They had invented fire on their own, they had domesticated animals on their own, they had domesticated crops on their own, and they were having an advanced late Iron Age technology. Your Excellency, now that Africa has at last solved its demographic problems, and we have also solved our leadership problems in a number of cases, we can interact for mutual benefit with our partners in Europe, in North America, in Japan, in China, Russia, India, Southeast Asia. However, this generation, our generation, Your Excellency, should not repeat past mistakes. Each one of us is differently endowed. Utilizing the principles of comparative advantages, we can produce and exchange goods and services to the benefit of both world consumers and world producers. Production will be efficient, and consumers will get goods and services at lower and affordable prices. In order for this to happen, it needs good and equitable agreements regulating world trade and bilateral trade. Consequently, the recent initiative in America to pass a new legislation entitled African Growth and Opportunity Act is most commendable. I have read that law, and one of my friends who has been fighting for it, Congressman Rangor, is here. Maybe you could stand up when they see you. I have read the law. It's a very good law. Emphasis, however, should be given to enabling Africa to overcome its historical disadvantages and to be ready to compete. The areas of infrastructure, especially roads, rails, urban water, and telephones, and energy are the most important in order to help our people to be able to compete. USA should help Uganda and Africa in general through soft loans and equity funds to resolve these bottlenecks. Moreover, when it comes to free trade, the advanced countries should unequivocally accept the implications of free trade. Inefficient industries will not only be injured, but will be eliminated. Many of ours were eliminated long ago. However, the global benefits of real free trade will benefit the efficient producers by giving them access to all markets in the world on a competitive basis, and also will help the consumers by giving them good quality and cost-effective products. If this does not happen, then free trade, I am sure in the future, may collapse. And then the world may go back to trading blocks. The other two areas of mutual benefit are investment and tourism. In these ways, we can mutually create and share wealth. If American companies invest here, they will give our people jobs, they will buy our utilities, buy our raw materials, and pay us taxes. Tourists also bring money directly to the country. It is in these three ways that we can profitably cooperate: trade, investment, and tourism. Aid is welcome, but it is limited. For instance, if you take Uganda as an example, out of our 3 sugar companies, the states get $11 million in tax revenues. Out of our 2 beer companies, the state gets $57 million. How much more would our state earn in terms of tax revenue if we had 10,000 such production units? Uganda would go to Paris Club not as a supplicant for aid, but as a donor. So, Your Excellency, to help us encourage American companies to come here and make this a base for their production. It is this tax revenue that will enable us to support education and health on a sustained basis. Donor funds cannot sustainably support education and health in backward countries. Donor fatigue will set in. Moreover, the funds of donors are also limited. Therefore, for the USA to support education and health in sub-Saharan Africa, they should support trade, investment, and tourism, as they are already doing. Therefore, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act by the US Congress is right on the point. We commend you in that effort. To prove that Africa's stagnation is not in our stars, but in our actions, I would like to inform our distinguished guests that Uganda declined by 37% of GDP between 1971 and 1986. However, during the last 11 years, the average annual rate of GDP growth of Uganda has been 6.3%. The same Uganda that was a disaster story in the 1970s and early 80s is now a promising story. Inflation was 240% in 1986. It has now been below 10% for the last 10 years. Our currency is completely convertible. It is therefore the actions of leaders that will activate or retard the growth of countries, and it's not their destiny to remain backward. Your Excellency, First Lady of the United States of America, my compatriots Ugandans, it is now my pleasure to invite President Bill Clinton of the United States to address you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and good afternoon. President Museveni, Mrs. Museveni, Ms. Vice President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, to Education Minister Mushega, to their Highnesses, the distinguished kings here, the religious leaders, and other distinguished leaders of Uganda, the members of our United States Congress, my cabinet, and other important citizens and public servants from the United States. And most of all, I want to thank the principals, the teachers, the students for showing me this wonderful school, the wonderful young people who walked down with us today, and the wonderful dancing exhibit we saw here today. Let's give them a big hand. I thought they were quite wonderful. As Hillary said, she and our daughter Chelsea came to Africa and to Uganda last year. I have heard a great deal about Uganda since then, over and over and over again. In selecting countries to visit, I almost felt I didn't need to come here because I knew enough anyway from talking to Hillary about it. I think, become your unofficial roving ambassador to the world. But let me say I am profoundly honored to be here. Honored to be on this continent, honored to be in this country, honored by the progress that has been made in these last few years in improving economic conditions and improving political conditions. Thank you for what you have done, Mr. President, and to all of you. Earlier today, we talked about trade and investment, and President Museveni wants more of both, and he should. We talked about political cooperation and how we could work together for the future. And I listened very carefully to what the President said about the history of Africa, the history of Uganda, the future, what mistakes have been made in the past. It is as well not to dwell too much on the past, but I think it is worth pointing out that the United States has not always done the right thing by Africa. In our own time, during the Cold War, when we were so concerned about being in competition with the Soviet Union, very often we dealt with countries in Africa and in other parts of the world based more on how they stood in the struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union than how they stood in the struggle for their own people's aspirations to live up to the fullest of their God-given abilities. And of course, going back to the time before we were even a nation, European Americans received the fruits of the slave trade, and we were wrong in that as well. Although, I must say, if you look at the remarkable delegation we have here from Congress, from our cabinet and administration, and from the citizens of America, there are many distinguished African Americans who are in that delegation who are making America a better place today. But perhaps the worst sin America ever committed about Africa was the sin of neglect and ignorance. We have never been as involved with you in working together for our mutual benefit, for your children and for ours, as we should have been. So I came here to listen and to learn, to offer my help and friendship and partnership. And I came in the hope that because all these good people up here in the media came with me and they're telling the American people back home what we're doing, that's okay. I came here in the hope, it's not raining, is it? It's been cold and cloudy in Washington. I need a suntan. I came here in the hope that the American people would see you with new eyes, that they would see the children dance, see the children learning, hear the children singing, and say, we should be part of the same future. Today I want to talk very briefly about that future for our children. President Museveni and Education Minister Mushega have made education a top priority, especially through the Universal Primary Education Program, and I loved hearing the children sing about it. But your leaders have done more than talk and sing. They have acted. In 5 years, education spending in Uganda has tripled, and teacher salaries have gone up 900%. I hate to say that. Back home, they'll wonder why I'm not doing better. And more importantly, you're getting something for your investment. Better trained teachers, higher test scores, improved performance and school attendance from girls. I know the Kisowera School is proud that it graduates as many girls as boys because we want all our children to learn so that all of them can succeed and make us all stronger. In most African countries, however, far fewer girls than boys enroll in school and graduate. 1/2 the primary school-age children are not in school, and that has led in many nations to a literacy rate among adults below 50%. Africa wants to do better. Uganda is doing better. The United States wants to help. Through a new initiative, the Education for Development and Democracy, we want to give $120 million over the next 2 years to innovative programs to improve education. We want to widen the circle of educational opportunity, as is already happening here in Uganda. We want to make investments in primary education for those who will educate boys and girls, because that is critical to improving health, reducing poverty, raising the status of women, spurring economic growth. We want to promote girls' education with leadership training and scholarships, nutrition training, and mentoring. We also want to support efforts to reach out-of-school youth. This is a huge problem in parts of Africa where there are children who were soldiers and are now adrift and without hope. Second, we want to help create community resource centers with schools that are equipped with computers linked to the internet, along with books and typewriters and radios for more long-distance learning. We want them to be staffed by Africans and American Peace Corps volunteers. Third, we want more new partnerships among African schools and between American and African schools so that we can learn from and teach each other through the internet. We do this a lot now at home. Let me give you an idea of how it might work. A student here in Mukono could make up the first line of a story and type it in to the internet to a student in Accra, Ghana, who could then add a second line, and they could go on together, back and forth, writing a story. A teacher in New York could give 5 math problems to students in Kampala, and they could send the answers back. One of the very first partnerships will link this school, Kisowera, with the Pinecrest Elementary School in Silver Spring, Maryland, USA. I want more of them. Fourth, we want to support higher education with the development of business, healthcare, science, math, and engineering courses. These are absolutely essential to give Africans the tools they need to compete and win in the new global economy, and we want to help do that. Finally, we want to build ties between associations and institutions within Africa and in America, so that groups in your nations and ours concerned with trade and investment, consumer issues, conflict resolutions, or human rights can connect with distant counterparts and learn together and work together. This will empower citizens on both continents. This initiative will help more Africans, all right, to start school, stay in school, and remain lifelong learners. But Americans will learn a great deal from it as well. We also want to support your efforts in health and nutrition. Uganda has suffered so much from AIDS, but President Museveni launched a strong education campaign with Frank Talk, and he has made a huge difference, as have all of you who have worked to turn around the AIDS problem in Uganda. We will continue to combat it with global research in healthcare and prevention efforts. But these efforts are also essential to combat malaria, an even greater killer of Africans. Nearly 3,000 children every day, 1 million each year, are lost to malaria. By weakening as well as killing people, malaria contributes to poverty and undermines economic growth. 90% of all malaria cases arise on the continent of Africa. But with increasing globalization, we are all at risk. We now fund in the United States half the research on malaria, but we want to do more. This year, we've committed $16 million more to help African nations fight infectious diseases, including malaria, with an additional $1 million to the West African Malaria Center in Mali. We also want to support good nutrition. There are troubling signs that without concerted efforts, Africa could face a major food and nutrition crisis in the coming years because of natural causes and social unrest. Children cannot learn if they are hungry. So we proposed a food security initiative for Africa to ensure that more African families can eat good meals and more African farmers can make good incomes. Over the next 10 years, we want to stay with you and work at this. In the next 2 years, we propose to spend over $60 million in Uganda, Mali, Malawi, Mozambique, and Ethiopia to increase food production, enhance marketing, expand agricultural trade and investment. I've learned a lot since I've been here about Ugandan bananas, Ugandan coffee. I will be an expert in all these matters when I go home. I want you to understand again what I said at the beginning. We want to do these things in education and healthcare and agriculture and nutrition because they will help you, because we want to see the light that is in these children's eyes, in their eyes forever, and in the eyes of all other children. But make no mistake about it, the biggest mistake America ever made with Africa over the long run was neglect and lack of understanding that we share a common future on this planet of ours that is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We do these things, yes, because we want to help the children, but we do it because we know it will help our children. For we must face the challenges and seize the opportunities of the 21st century together. The next century, in a new millennium, will be the brightest chapter in all of human history, if, but only if, it is bright for all our children. Thank you, and God bless you.
Yes, sir.